Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Resilient Advisor Show. My name is Jay Coulter, and on this episode, we're going to speak with Matt Halloran of ProudMouth, and we're going to talk about ways that you can build your influence as a financial advisor. Matt Halloran has been a longtime guest of the Resilient Advisor Show. We've covered many topics, but always centered around marketing. Matt, you've had some changes in your brand, at your company. Tell us what's going on.
Lots of stuff, man. And in fact, the craziest thing is when most people roll out a new brand, nobody really cares, right? We're all excited about it. Yay! We had over 20,000 people like, share, and comment on this new brand. And the main reason isn't just because of the cool name, ProudMouth, but it's because our new focus, right? So we've been working within financial services forever, and we're going to continue to do that, right? Because that's our bread and butter. We know this game. But we've also found, Jay, that experts, right? Our whole foundation here is to free the world's experts from sales. And the way that we do that is doing exactly what you're doing, right? Creating great content, connecting with people, and, utilizing the system that Kirk and I have taken the last 3 years to build and really perfect. And surprisingly enough, it's the way that we've grown our business so much too. So that's what ProudMouth is, right? Our whole focus is to help people rise above the noise, because there's a lot of noise, man, right? And then to truly be your own loud, which is like the empowerment of experts to get their voice out in the marketplace.
Kirk and I, your partner, Kirk Lowe, and I had an opportunity to connect at a conference last year. Remember when we could meet in person?
Yeah.
And he sat me down afterwards. We went to dinner. And when I say he sat me down, he did sit me down. And he said, Coulter, your brand is a mess. We got to clean this up. You guys are so good at what you do. And I got to tell you, once you launched, I had to go look at your website. And I'm going to pull it up for our live stream viewers here. I mean, that's first-rate marketing.
You know what's crazy, dude? Kirk is a branding expert, right? We hired a team to come in and help us. And so there's this great book called Fix, and it talks about how to create a cult brand. And Kirk and I really have very large aspirations for ProudMouth. I mean, we want to truly help experts just stop having to do the hard close, all of the lead generation crap that they have to deal with. We know that there's a better way. And when we brought in this team, his name Rob Howard is the key player. It's surprisingly enough, you can't actually find him. You have to be referred into him. And we had an in, which was super cool. But if anybody wants to know about it, they can contact me. But Rob brought in all of these other people. This guy named Charles. Charles wrote the whole narrative for us. He came up with Free the World's Expert from Sales. We had already had Be Your Own Loud and Rise Above the Noise. Those are things that Kirk and I have been saying for a while. But the whole thing was this feel, right? I'm Generation X, right? Which, by the way, used to be cool.
It's not cool anymore. It's not cool.
I don't think so, dude, but we're trying. So we really wanted to kind of embody our generation. We're rising to power, brother. And so, that's what ProudMouth is all about, is taking our generation, Gen Y and millennials, and just saying, hey, look, you have to market in the expertise economy. If you're an expert, we know how to do it.
So we've got a sequence of questions to help advisors walk through how they can build some influence. Sure. But I want to start with this, and I didn't prep you for this question. There is so much darn noise in the financial advisor space, not only for advisors marketing to their end clients, and because I stalk you and Kirk, for folks like us marketing to financial advisors, and the problem's the same. There's so much content out there. How do you cut through that and get your message across?
It's got to be your content, Jay. That's it, right? That's why this podcast, that's why this show is doing so well across all platforms, is because you're not just regurgitating other people's stuff. And now those of us who provide services to financial advisors, I think most of us take pride in our uniqueness, right? But you really have to look at the message. That's the big thing. So if you're a financial advisor and you're marketing to the general public, first off, you're marketing to the general public. There's your first mistake, right? Nowadays you have to have a niche, you have to have a niche, you have to have a vertical. If you don't have that, you're going to waste so much money screaming into the abyss, right? Of what is out there. So that's the number one thing. You have to figure out who you're going to market to. In fact, I was just talking to a friend of mine today with these new MEPs, right, which are huge. He has access to podiatrists and people who own propane businesses. And he's like, those are two really odd niches, Matt. I was like, yeah, but you're bringing MEPs to these people. And all of a sudden, that was the key that he needed, right? He'd just been screaming at these two major groups for a long time. But now that he has that thing that nobody, and by the way, a lot of advisors aren't prepared for MEPs. For those of you who don't know what those are, multi-employer plans, right? It gives financial services professionals the opportunity to take a group of like businesses and turn it into one kind of a 401k thing, including benefits. And it's like this game changer, I believe. And man, he spoke, which was weird. They had a conference, which I'm not going to talk about, but they actually had a conference and people freaked out. They were so excited because his message resonated so clearly with those two verticals. So that's really the first thing. That's how you rise above the noise. It has to be your voice. You can't be repurposing other people's stuff.
Excellent. So as I was thinking about how to frame this question set with you, I've got an idea. And it's almost a role play where you're coming with me on a consulting call with a financial advisor. So before we get started, I want listeners to know I've got a special guest here at the end of this exercise. And if you're watching this live on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and you want to ask Matt a question, just post a comment and it will come through this fancy system and I'll be able to pose it to Matt. So let's start with this, Matt. I called you up and said, hey, Matt, I've got an advisor, absolutely no brand. They've got a niche. I always use dentist because I don't care for that niche. It's dentist. Walk me through the conversation with the advisor and how they're going to find success building influence.
So the number one thing that they have to do is they have to find out where dentists go. Dentists are going to go just like any other expertise profession. They're going to go somewhere to get their information, right? And then what you do is you look and see who is participating in the creation of that content. So for instance, if there's like, the Michigan Dental Association, which there is Michigan Dental Association here. You just look through and see who's writing the articles. You want to contact the editor. You want to do that sort of stuff. And then what you do is you start reading the magazine. The most important part about focusing on a niche for your client here is to be able to communicate in the language that niche uses, right? Mm-hmm. Dentists have their own lingo, dude, just like we do in financial services, right?
MEPs.
Yep. There you go. And so you have to learn that. And so you usually take about, 60 to 90 days of really just submerging your brain into their content. You create a hit list. This is really important. Everybody's talked since insurance days, dude. The Hot 100, Top 100, Top 150, whatever you want.
It's in one of my books. I mean, that's his old shirt.
I know, but hey, we're not spring chickens anymore, brother. But that's the kicker, right? You're going to make a list of 100 dentists. And the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to do market research. This is the gold, okay? You're going to call up some people in that are close in your network. So it's not going to be weird. And you're going to say, hey, this is not a sales call. I am working on trying to provide services to dentists in the world of financial advice. I have 3 questions for you. Could I set up an appointment? I'll pay you for your time, right? I'm not going to come in and you're not going to do work on my teeth, but if I could pay you for your time to get, 10, 15 minutes of your time to ask you these questions, that would be great. And those questions are, what are your biggest concerns, right? If a financial services professional could solve one problem for you, what would it be? And then the last one is, who do you want to hear from that is the best of the best in the industry? Because guess what, Jay? You're making your freaking expertise guest list right there.
Right. It's brilliant.
And the fun part about it is they'll tell you this information because they know it's going to benefit them, right? So you do that with 5 or 10. 20 if you really want to get aggressive. You got a white paper. You got your first 20 podcasts ready to go. You've got your podcast guests, and you also know the distribution of where you're going to get that podcast and your social media content placed, which would be in the dentist groups and all of that sort of stuff. And if you handle it well, they're going to let you into those groups.
Man, that rolled off your tongue. I could see how that would work sequentially. That's a lot for an advisor to do on their own. Tell me, how does your company help advisors go through that whole process?
Well, so that's if you're just going to do it on your own and you just want to, kind of try to hit the ball out of the park. We don't actually follow that system. We have a very different system, and our system it's just way easier, Jay. When Kirk and I connected and became partners and shut down our respective businesses, our whole goal was to stop telling advisors what to do and do it for them. So I can't do a lot of that for them, dude. I just can't. But we have 9 podcasting tactics that we take our clients through. And those 9 podcast tactics cover a lot of that, but it's just parsed in a little different sort of, not in a sequence, parsed in a little different way to execute that our coaches, our hosts help the client stay accountable for in order for them to continue to increase their influence.
Excellent. So that 9-step process, let's not walk through it. That's a lot of your secret sauce, but what are a couple of the high level tactics that you help them implement? And then I want to bring in a guest to talk.
Sure. Yeah. And this guy, I'm so excited about having him on the show. 1, he's freaking amazing. 2, we love him dearly. Could quite possibly be one of our best clients, period. Oh, was I not supposed to say that? Okay. Whatever. I said it. Tough nuggets. All right. First off, we've given all 9 tactics away on our podcast. I don't have secret sauce anymore. My sauce is out there for everybody to try, but I'm going to give you a couple that nobody pays attention to. The first one is pick a fight. Oh my God. This is the greatest podcast tactic ever. You as a financial services professional hate something. Annuities, DFA, buy and hold, asset allocation, individual stock picks, timing the market. I don't care what it is. That is how you get a raving fan.
I love that. And if I could interject for a second, if I post something about Bitcoin, hedge funds being a waste of money, or if you're just buying the index, you're not really a financial advisor, I get killed, but the stats go through the roof.
but so let's just take that last one, right? So if you're just buying the indexes, right? Well, maybe your pick a fight is your hate of the benchmarking aspect of indexes, right? Because the index doesn't take into a balanced portfolio. The index also depends on the freaking index, right? Because the way the S&P indexes stuff is totally different than the way the NASDAQ and the Dow does, right? And so anyway, so pick a fight, man. That's super powerful. We've got a lady, her name is Kimberly Greco-Kyle. She's really big into ESG, socially responsible investing, and she attacks companies left and right for not being sustainable, not being equitable, and not actually having an environmental foundation. So there's number 1. Number 2 is what we refer to as the 12 by 20. Now, this was Kirk's brainchild. I always love giving him credit for this because I think this is just genius. That guy's freaking smart, by the way. What it is you take 12 of your top clients. So all of you have these are your A++ clients. And you ask them what they're most passionate about. Okay. And you're going to get everything: wine, whiskey, cigars, travel, planes, golf, whatever. And then you're going to ask them to introduce you to their most influential people within that circle. You're going to interview that person on your podcast. So let's say, like my old boss, Ron, loved flying planes. And so he would go to the local Cessna place and bring in the Cessna dealer, right? And then you'd have a podcast about the Cessna, right? And then you ask those 12 people to share that podcast. So that one person who loves Cessnas with directly email 20 people within that circle. They're going to listen to the podcast because they love freaking Cessnas, right? Or they love great wine, or they love great whiskey. And it's just a great way for you, because here's the golden goose. You don't talk about finance at all. Because nobody wants to hear that crap anyway.
No, they don't.
No.
What's the third?
Yeah. So the third, let's see, which one do I want to do on the third? So I think the third really is something that a lot of people already do, but need to do a lot more, which is interview their centers of influence, right? That's the key. Is if you interview your centers of influence, the probability of them sharing a 30-minute commercial about how awesome they are is very, very high. It's a great way for you to separate yourself from other people who are begging CPAs and estate planning attorneys for referrals. Get them on your freaking show.
Yep. That's not the first time you've given that recommendation on the show. Just yesterday, one of my clients and I were talking about his podcast and what he needed to do. Man, that's in the back pocket all the time, because that's the biggest no-brainer. Call up somebody who's a center of influence, an industry expert, have them come on your live stream and talk about podcasting. We're practicing what we preach.
I know, dude. I absolutely agree. Well, that's how you've grown. I mean, look at your exposure now, Jay. One of the reasons why, besides you're awesome and you have really great content, but you're interviewing influential people who have huge networks who are going to share your stuff with these concentric circles, right? And that's the same thing you can do as a financial services professional. Now, I'm going to say something very quickly. There are compliance departments that have a really hard time with this. We just had a client who was with a really large broker dealer. They won't let them interview guests because they're afraid that it'll look like that broker dealer is offering legal advice. Now, we know that's not true. If anybody listened, what was it, Monday when you went with the SEC ruling?
Oh, well, Chris Wynn, we talked about the advertising rule. Yeah.
So if you haven't listened to that, please go back and go through Jay's LinkedIn or Twitter or everywhere and find that. That is a perfect example of the value that Jay brings to our audience. And hopefully more people will watch that and more people will, I don't know, the FINRA will figure out what they need to pull their head out of their butt, but whatever.
Matt, you are too kind. Talking about proof points. So Matt has invited one of his clients onto the show. I'm going to pipe him into the studio now. For those of you watching live and in real time, this is the first time I've brought in a third guest. Let's hope it works. Yes, we've got it. I want to introduce you to David Pulcini of SixPoint Financial Partners. And Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you. And maybe you could talk to David about the experience he's had launching his particular podcast.
Well, so there's a lot of really fun things about Dave, but the first thing is, David, one of the things that we say right at the beginning of your relationship with us is that you need to talk about your podcast all over the place. And you, for some reason, actually listened to us, which was magnificent. Why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about what it's been like, just from an influence and credibility standpoint, about just saying you have a podcast?
Yeah, it's a great point, Matt. First of all, I'm a huge fan of podcasts. I've been listening to them for years, and I wanted to do my own thing, but I was very afraid, so I just hadn't pulled the trigger yet. So it's very recent that I've done this, but I will tell you guys, in the last 6 months, I probably started working with Matt, and at the time it was Top Advisor Marketing and ProudMouth. Now it's ProudMouth, but I started immediately just telling people, hey, I'm starting a podcast, or hey, I'm doing a podcast. And even my own wife, Matt, I don't think I told you this. My wife said to me, I thought you had to know what you were doing to have a podcast, which is beautiful. That's exactly what I want her to say. That's the credibility I get at home, by the way. But anyway, just telling people I have podcasts. I actually have, you guys talk about bringing guests on. I have my friends and other centers of influence, or my niche market, or niche, as Kirk would say in Canada. I have people asking me to come on the podcast, and it hadn't even been released. By the way, this is Wednesday. It was released on Monday. Nobody has heard it. It might be horrible for all that they know, but I have people asking me to come on. But just telling my clients that I have a podcast, they're like, it's instant credibility, Matt. People are, by the way, everybody, Matt's not paying me for this. I don't think. I didn't know this question ahead of time. I didn't know he was going to ask me this. It's just true. And I've had people come in, clients have clicked links, or they visited our website, or prospective clients, I should say, and just from saying I have a podcast. So I can't imagine what it's actually going to be like when it gets out there, and if people really enjoy it.
Well, I hope they really enjoy it, because you got the great personality for it. Now let's just talk very quickly about the onboarding process. I get asked this all the time, David, so I figured I'd just ask you this. Okay. So what was it like going through the onboarding process? Was it cumbersome? I mean, be honest. Was it cumbersome? Did it take too long? Let's talk about that real quick.
Well, as any advisor would say, if I made the decision to do a podcast, man, I want to start at 5 minutes from right now. So anything past 5 minutes took too long. So no, it was very, you guys said this at the beginning, you made it very easy. And you said something like, we took what advisors wanted, we just did it for them. It's so true. I have my own business going. I have a book of business. I have 5 other advisors that I somewhat manage. We have a team of staff. I have other things to do, but I knew I wanted to do a podcast. So, I mean, little things. And Matt, can I talk about the little things that were done that I think were important? Because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, I'd say, with this. You guys sent me a list of, like, what music do you want for the intro? What voice do you want reading the script? What do you want your outro to say? And all I had to do was pick from some options, which greatly helps a guy like me, by the way, because I can say, Matt, for the voice, let's go with the male voice number 3. By the way, who do you want as a host? Listen to these 2. Here's your host. And we pick Patrice because she offsets me perfectly, and it's been going great. So, and then even, like I said, music, intro, voice, very easy. We even had a call on how to set up the equipment, which I was somewhat fine with. You guys will laugh at this. I'm like, guys, I got the equipment. I'm fine. I can plug in a microphone, and I'm using it right now, by the way. And everyone, this is where I podcast from. So I don't need a fancy studio with stuff in the background. I'm sitting in my office right now. I podcast from right here. Hopefully people aren't outside mowing the lawn during the summer, like it was once, but then we just edit it. So I do all that. But when we were setting up the equipment, we went through the whole thing, and I'm like, I just can't get it to work. And we had like your team, Matt, on the phone, and they're like, we don't know what it is. I didn't plug the microphone into the back. So if anybody's listening you have to plug in your microphone for it to work. It's my best advice of the day.
Well, that's why we really walk you through all of those things, because sometimes it's actually that easy. The new mics that we send everybody actually have an on-off switch, and so we make sure that they turn the mic on. So David, one of the other things that, and Jay and I have talked about this on other podcasts or other web things like we're doing right now, is there are a lot of people who want to do this, but they're afraid to start. What sort of advice do you have for advisors who have the niche or the niche, like, we've talked about? I just totally slaughtered both of those words, by the way.
We got it.
Yeah, good thing. And, if you do have that, and you know that you have good guests that can bring on, what would you say to get people over the hump?
You mentioned that I have the personality for this. I did not think that I did. And I still don't think that I do, by the way. No doubt about it. Like to get on and talk for 15, 20, 25 minutes, which, by the way, the episodes, as you guys know, our clients can't handle more than 20 to 25 minutes of this stuff. So Patrice will cut me off, as you might have to, because I'll just keep going in a polite way. But first of all, I was afraid to do it. Second, I was afraid of the time commitment. Like, how long is it going to take me to prepare? I go back to my wife saying, I thought you had to know what you were doing. Well, how long am I going to need to prepare? If I'm talking about, and not that I would ever do this, but an entire podcast on Medicare taxes, I'm not going to do that. But if I want to know some facts on that, like you look it up ahead of time. So I prepare I do my podcast every other Thursday. And on Tuesdays for 1 hour, I prepare and I make bullet points. And you could actually script it out. I would not recommend that, but I'm telling you, man, I was afraid to do it. And I know it doesn't sound like it right now, but I was, and I did not think I had the personality for it. I will say, as advisors, we know way more than we think we do. And you can break it down extremely simply. Like, what is a stock? We could all talk for an hour about that if you wanted to. Again, I wouldn't do that. But the other thing was the niche. You guys going back to the guests, Matt, something that really made me interested in doing this was when you guys talked about bringing experts on or guests or like the lifestyle things. I'm thinking of the business side of it as well, obviously, as most of us are. But what about like in my local niche at Rochester Regional Health? Huge hospital, 15,000 employees in Rochester. That's like half of the city. What if I could get on an HR person to talk about their benefits? What about a recruiter bringing people in? You bring a recruiter, and as advisors, we know this. When somebody's being recruited at a high level to a new place in a new city, what do they need? Typically, a transfer of assets. If it makes sense for that client, they need to do some things. They want to be introduced to the network and so forth. So having those people on is great. But yeah, it was time. I was afraid to do it. But it really was made easy. And then the other thing, last thing I'll say on this, topics. I was so nervous about, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to say? I don't have enough. I am telling you guys, I have a list on an Excel sheet, like 400 episodes deep. I don't even know what to do next, because when you start thinking that way, I'm not exaggerating. I can show it to you guys. It's like, oh, this client just asked me about, should I take money out of my IRA to pay off my car?
Yeah.
You could do an entire podcast on that.
Yeah.
Like, and these are just client questions. Like, this isn't any of the other stuff. So I will never run out of content. I could do a podcast every day now. And I'm telling you, at first I was afraid that I would not have enough material. Now I'm afraid that I want to do a podcast every day to get it out there.
That'd be probably too expensive for you too. Jay, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, so I did have a question going into this, and you actually just nailed it, coming up with topics, because the pushback that I typically get, it usually starts like this. Coulter, I don't know how you keep coming up with all these shows and the different topics. I mean, Matt and I have done an episode on podcast once a year for the past 3, or this might be the 4th year in a row. So the ability to go back, clearly you've already crossed that hurdle. The next question I usually get is, Jay, if I start a show, and I don't produce podcasts, I send them all to Matt and Kirk, can I get off topic? Can I go and talk about things that have nothing to do with the industry? And I'd love to get Matt's thoughts. But first, I'd love to get your thoughts on that, David. Have you considered that approach?
Absolutely. So just so you guys know, and I personal experience, Matt told me I could say anything I want. I've recorded 6 episodes. That's it. And I consider that like my bank. I have my intro to me. What does SixPoint Financial mean, which I won't get into now? What's our process? All the normal stuff that I can now send to people ahead of time before a first appointment, by the way, which is beautiful. Listen to this podcast and you will know what to expect from us on a first meeting. Now I feel like I'm just giving Matt a lot of credit here, but I guess maybe Kirk deserves it. Yeah, I'll give it to Kirk. All right. So I've had people already come in and say, guys, I am not kidding. On Monday, my podcast was released. I had a phone call this morning with a current client that works at the healthcare system that said, my friends and I listened to your podcast. We were talking about the lump sum options. We all know what that means. They have a pension, lump sum options, whatever. If it makes sense, great. If it doesn't, that's great too. But it's people that want to talk with me and my team. This was released on Monday. And then Matt's team and Kirk's team put it out on LinkedIn after they connected with like hundreds of people that I didn't know. And now these people are starting to respond already. So it's been 2 days and I've already heard from it's a current client, but she said she listened to it. I didn't even know she knew it existed, by the way. So that had to be from you guys. So maybe I need to do a better job of telling people. Jay, my point is 6 episodes. I've got the bank built where I can send that ahead of time. My next 2, literally yesterday and today, I've been texting my centers of influence or friends outside of financial services, a local restaurant / establishment owner. How's it been going during this time? It's like everybody knows this place in Rochester. So I want to have him come on and talk about what's going on. So I completely agree. I'm trying to keep it interesting. You guys all know this. If I sat there and rambled on about financial services for 2 hours, it's not going to last very long. And nobody wants to hear that. So totally think it's a great idea to bring on other people and other passions and stuff that I like, by the way, so that I can talk to them about it.
David, a follow-up question, because I know I'll get this after the show. They'll say, Jay, I heard David talk about his experience with Top Advisor. What can you tell me about David's firm? So David, can you share with listeners and viewers a little bit about SixPoint Financial Partners?
Yeah. So 2 years ago, a little over 2 years now. Last year seems like it didn't exist. So yeah, 2.5 years ago, we started SixPoint Financial Partners, just as an independent firm. We all moved from an insurance broker dealer, and SixPoint, the name of it is just, and everybody knows this. I basically stole the 6 steps of the CFP planning process. That's where SixPoint came from. You guys know this. If you've named your own firm, and you didn't use your last name, I guess the naming it is like naming one of your children. So we went through like hundreds of easels and whiteboards, and we had people trying to help us and everything. And then one day in my kitchen, like I'm getting a glass of wine, I'm like, wow, what about SixPoint Financial? And then I texted out, and there it was. But it's this. I'm talking to financial advisors. We do all of those 6 steps. I would say we're a high touch with service. I send out monthly videos, individual to each of our top clients, by the way, which they love. So I use a service that just sends the monthly video out. I have a topic preset, and it's like, hey, Jay, how are you? Happy New Year. This year, here's the new IRS tax laws. And last year you contributed this. This year, let's talk about that. And they can respond anytime they want. So I would say we do all the same stuff that everybody else that's listening does. And we definitely have a high touch. And we went independent because, again, I was listening to the podcast forever. I knew I wanted to start my own, and we go back to compliance. I would have never been allowed to do this at my old place. No doubt about it. So the videos, the podcast, the white papers, by the way, separate videos. We're making sketch videos with certain topics that we can get out to people, again, to build that bank. So we're working a lot on the marketing side as well as continuing to service our current clients.
Excellent. David, I really appreciate you coming on to share your experience and talk about your business as well. I'm going to wrap this show up here with Matt and put you back in our digital waiting room. I'm really, really grateful for you coming on. And for listeners, he was not paid for this testimonial.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, man.
Matt, I have spoken with clients of yours. They've all had the same experience. They had it when you were top advisor marketing. They're going to have it with ProudMouth. For listeners and viewers that are thinking about starting a podcast, you've kind of walked through what the experience would be like. How can folks get in touch with you? And is there anything else they need to know about what they would experience?
So one thing that we really, we just launched this, which is join the Influence Accelerator Academy, right? So this is a free thing that Kirk and our whole team has created. There are some paid things, but just join for free. That way you're going to be getting a lot more of our thought leadership. But I think the big thing is setting up a commitment. Like David agreed to work with us for an entire year, right? So that's what our normal agreement is. But we decided that we were going to create something. It's called the Starter Influencer Series, right? And so what the Starter Influencer thing is, it really is just a way you do 5 podcasts, right? So Dave's talking about having stuff in the can, right? So this is wicked important. Who you are, what makes you unique and different, your process, so on and so forth. But then the last one, this is the golden goose, is an interview with a COI. So you have this little, influencer series, and you can just go ahead and start there, right? If you have any marketing reallowance from any sort of IMO, FMO, whatever, it'll cover it with no problem. But it's a great way to dip your toe in the water, get some good content out, see what we can do for you, and then also see the impact before you make a long-term investment. So that's probably it. But connect with me on freaking LinkedIn. I'm there exclusively. I'm starting to get way more active on Twitter. It's really distracting, so I need to figure out how I can manage that for myself. But you can follow me on Twitter. It's Matt Halloran _. But I'd love to connect with anybody who has any questions. So.
Excellent. Matt, thanks so much for coming on. You're always a wealth of knowledge, generous with your time. You create great action items. And just so you know, I just follow what you say to do and do it myself. So.
Thanks, Jay.